Good day, class. My name is Craig Greeley. I'll provide to you a brief presentation here on AeroPeru Flight 603. For those of you that did not take a look at my opening introduction in the previous discussion post, my background, I'm the C-130J Senior Design Engineer here in Canada. So what that title means is that for our fleet, I'm the Technical Airworthiness Authority signing off on applicable risk assessments against our fleet. So the stance that I've taken here as part of this presentation is along the lines of what I would typically do as part of a day-to-day risk assessment. I've provided here references linking back to the ICAO as well as the FAA documents for safety management systems that'll help guide you through discussions on risk assessments. In summary of the accident that occurred in 1996, AeroPeru were operating a Boeing 757 that was inducted for depot level maintenance in about May timeframe earlier that year. It was noted in the articles that there was a series of improper maintenance procedures that were utilized by technicians for cleaning and polishing the aircraft. Two of them came down to they were utilizing a masking tape to cover up the static ports on the aircraft as opposed to a moisture resistant paper. We could have a debate whether or not masking tape is considered moisture resistant paper, but I don't think that's what Boeing was referring to. They also, post-maintenance activities, did not remove all the masking tape from the static ports on the aircraft. The aircraft was subsequently released for flight, not removing all the masking tapes, and during its first flight on the 2nd of October 1996, the aircraft was providing erroneous data, both airspeed and altitude, to the aircrew. This led to confusion between the left-hand side and right-hand side instruments and an inability for the pilot and co-pilot to properly control the aircraft, leading to a loss of speed, altitude, and subsequently crashing into the Pacific Ocean. Following a standard sort of risk assessment model here, what I've provided to you is what we would go through and consider for the hazard condition, cause, and effect. The hazard condition, generally spoken, is the thing that is going to keep you up at night, if you will. So what are you concerned about here as you discuss and you analyze this particular situation? Particularly for myself, if you will, I'm concerned about the static ports being blocked. I've got a high level of confidence, if you will, in the pilot's ability to control the aircraft if they have accurate data with regards to airspeed and altitude. I mean, pilots are trained to be pilots. But what I'm concerned about in this scenario is that the static ports are being blocked. They're being blocked under the hazard cause, ultimately with regards to the improper maintenance procedures. And I previously broke down the two instances as to why that exists. The hazard effect, if you will, what was the end state result here, is, as I alluded to earlier, the inability for the pilot to control the aircraft due to the erroneous data that was being provided, the loss of airspeed, altitude, and subsequent loss of the aircraft and personnel on board. In aviation, this is obviously not the first time that a situation like this has occurred. You can go back and you can look at a fantastic video, I'll link it in the references at the end, on the X-31 crash that happened just a year prior to this particular incident, whereby poor maintenance procedures, complacency, if you will, for an experimental aircraft in the test program it was going under, and a lack of communication resulted in the very same, or at least I should say similar thing happening, whereby the pedostatic tube on the aircraft got iced over, and as a result of that provided erroneous data to the aircraft, and subsequently the aircraft crashed. In that particular instance, because of the ejection seat, the pilot was able to escape. But as I alluded to earlier, pilots are trained to fly, but they need that accurate information in order to be able to do that. Providing them with inaccurate data increases the level of risk for them to be able to control that aircraft in space. The communication as well as the adherence to instruments was also discussed, if you will, within the references at the end as a contributing factor to the crash that occurred. But strictly from a maintenance management perspective, I focus primarily in on the maintenance aspects of this. The risks and hazards, if you will, from the overall lack of compliance to maintenance policies and procedures, as we've seen in this particular incident, have increased the probability, if you will, of this occurrence happening, if you will. So while the severity remains the same in that you can have a crash, a loss of an aircraft, by not adhering to maintenance policy and procedures in this regard, you increase the probability, thus increasing the risk. The article does a fantastic job alluding to some of the overall mitigation strategies that could be put in place, if you will. The highlighted there at the top, coming back to the need for some sort of high visibility device on critical components like these static ports to almost like you remove before a flight flag to alert pilots, to alert ground crews of the fact that there's an issue here that still needs to be addressed. I also would like to point out that you could change, if you will, the maintenance program to highlight the need for additional oversight. In a situation here, you could have one technician that goes out, he does a verification for the to ensure that static ports are not blocked over. But then you can have a second maintenance tech who needs to sign off an applicable work order to go and do the exact same. The article discusses, or at least I should say, the non-compliance in maintenance policy and procedure points out the fact that maybe within this organization there's an aspect of culture, whether it be safety or maintenance, that needs to be investigated. That could be done through external or internal auditing programs, as well as pilot training requirements. Though pilots will be pilots, the original articles did point out the fact that there was communication between the two pilots that may have contributed to the end-state result. As the maintenance authority, if you will, if I was provided this information following a crash of one of my aircraft, the first thing that I would do would be immediately ground the fleet. That might be somewhat harsh or reactive, but at the end of the day, an aircraft did just crash in the Pacific Ocean. All personnel on board perished, unfortunately. So in that regard, it does warrant, if you will, a strong reaction because there's a safety issue that's not known that needs to be known. But as these specifics come out from the National Transportation Safety Board, as we were provided, if you will, my crews, both pilots and maintainers, if you will, I would brief them, i.e. on the specifics to adhering to maintenance policy and procedure, as well as the specifics of the event to understand, or at least to ensure that they understand the criticality, if you will, of this scenario. I would also institute an independent check of these critical areas. So that's what I was referring to earlier in terms of having two technicians verify each other's work in that regard. That's a common practice here in Canada for critical areas such as this. I would also institute a special inspection across the fleet now that they're grounded to go out and double check all static ports to ensure that there's not another aircraft out there in the same sort of configuration, as well as you could also institute a functional check across the fleet to verify the status of all the systems and ensure that they're working properly. At this point in time, there's very potentially limited information, so the root cause still needs to be evaluated. But you could call for an external and internal audit later on down the road once you have a better feedback as to what the situation and scenario was. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all for my quick little presentation here. By all means, if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I've highlighted two videos here as part of my own research, if you will. So I'll provide those to everybody so you can go and take a look at them for yourself if you do have any concerns or you're curious about the X31 or the previous Mayday video that was produced by the Discovery Channel with regards to this specific scenario. Cheers. Thank you very much for watching.